Now, many of you undoubtedly have heard of the outrageous case of a 15-year-old high school student, Grace, who was arrested in the state of Michigan in late May for not doing her homework. That's right, arrested and jailed for not doing her homework. Now, thankfully, due to massive pressure in the state of Michigan and around the country, Grace was released late last week, but the case in and of itself is deeply indicative of problems with the school to prison pipeline here in the United States. Grace was brought before this court on a previous probation issue. Doing the homework had allegedly been a part of the probation, but of course, one of the things that has taken place is this worldwide, global, massive pandemic, which meant that many students have had to switch to distance learning, and many students, Grace included, have struggled to fully transition from distance learning. Not something that you think would end up putting someone in prison. The judge, however, stated that Grace needed to be incarcerated because she was a danger, a physical danger to her mother. Now, one problem with that is her mother testified at that hearing that she was not, in fact, any sort of physical danger to her person. So clearly the judge, on her own decision, her own recognizance, decided to incarcerate a child for reasons that seem to do with racism. Now, once this case became major all across the country, well known, there was a concerted effort by high school students in particular in the Detroit area to organize support for Grace and to get her freed. In fact, and we were able to talk about the case and many of its implications as it concerns the school to prison pipeline with Ama and Eva of Black Lives Matter in All Capacities, which was a Detroit area organization. They are themselves high school students. That really was the spearhead of the effort to free Grace. Well, we're really thrilled to be able to have you, and of course, very happy that in the time since we set this up and done this interview that Grace has in fact been freed. But I wanted to go back, really a few days here and talk about what was it that made you all feel so strongly that you had to take action when one of your classmates was incarcerated like this.
Yeah, so Grace actually is not one of our classmates. We go to Cass Tech, and Grace attended Groves High School, which is in Birmingham, Michigan, and we are from Detroit. So what really drew us to Grace is that we saw ourselves in Grace. Black girls across this nation can identify with being adultified and criminalized for just being themselves, or when they are asking and crying for help, we are instantly seen as the agitator. So even I definitely grasped towards Grace because we saw ourselves in Grace, and this was outrageously something wrong that was happening during a pandemic, and we're fighting to liberate Black girls. So this was only like a must for us.
Our transition into distance learning was also extremely difficult. And the fact that Grace was punished for not completing her homework is a situation that Ama and I could have easily been in.
The way some of the media and some of the, I guess, legal figures, you could say, initially tried to portray it is, well, everyone who's upset about this is upset for the wrong reasons. She wasn't, jailed for her homework, but she was some kind of threat or whatever it may be. I mean, you all heard it all, so you know it. I mean, talk some, if you could, about a little bit more, I think, if you could, about this issue of the criminalization of Black young people, of Black girls, in the context of what we're seeing in the school to prison pipeline, because it really felt like so much of the pushback to the organizing you all were doing was essentially like, well, this is just some terrible criminal, so no one should feel bad for her.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the school system, Black girls are often criminalized a lot more than their white counterparts. And this just goes because of the way that we speak as Black girls, how we dress, and the way we carry ourselves. And it's not necessarily that maybe our white counterparts are different than us. And the only difference that we have is our skin color. But yet oftentimes you see that Black girls, we are punished more severely, and we are judged harsher than our white counterparts. And I think this also goes to show, especially when you see it in dress code in schools, and in a lot of inner city schools, you have very strict dress codes on what Black children can and cannot wear. But when you take a look into the suburban schools, you don't see that dress code, and you see that they're very much so lenient with what the students are allowed to wear. And I think that also goes to show how Black children and Black students are more criminalized than their white counterparts.
Definitely. Specifically with Grace, we forgot that she was a Black girl. Emphasis on the girl. She is 15 years old. And we tend to adultify Black girls, and because we have to grow up a lot faster than our counterparts, we are treated like we are adults, even though we are still children. We're given this, you had to know better. When our counterparts, they're given the benefit of the doubt, they're still treated like children when we are not. With the school to prison pipeline, like Eva was talking about, we are policed from what we wear when we're in the building. Every sense of our being is policed, and we are treated like we are trained to be inmates. From our uniform, there's a strict uniform that we must wear. There is a way we are taught to be obedient instead of behaving as children.
You know, I think that's an extraordinarily important point, and it leads me to my next question. If you could tell our listeners a little bit more about the organizing that you all did around this case, what the response was of other young people in the Detroit area and Michigan to what you've done so far.
The first demonstration that we held was a sit-in at the courthouse where Grace was sentenced, and our turnout wasn't so great with that, but at the end of the day, it was very successful and our presence was known. But then once we saw that, the judge and the media wasn't necessarily reacting to our first demonstration and Grace wasn't being released, that's when we decided to take it a step further and have this overnight rally at the detention center. And that was to just kind of symbolize to Grace that, we're standing in solidarity with you. We will not allow your story to be forgotten, and we will not allow you to, slip through the cracks of this unjust system. The judge was supposed to have a hearing for Grace Thursday morning, and she was supposed to kind of take an overview of Grace's case and make a decision on whether or not she wanted to release Grace. But she held off until Friday, and we do believe that she held this off because of our demonstration and also because of the car caravan that happened in her neighborhood. And it actually was the Court of Appeals that released Grace, and it was not the judge. If it was solely up to the judge, Grace would still be in this detention center and she would not be getting released.
Some components that we had going during our overnight occupation. Well, we were there from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. We had voter registration going on with When We All Vote. We were writing letters of encouragement and love to Grace and to other scholars occupying Children's Village. Around about 9 o'clock, we had a speaker series, and Senator Bayer and State Rep Brenda Carter, they joined us, organizations locally in Detroit like Detroit Will Breathe, My Students Dream, DAM, BYP 100. They all joined us in speaking and sharing the mic and doing chants. At about 11 or 12, we showed the movie Push Out, the documentary Push Out, and then we did early morning sunrise yoga in the morning. During the whole occupation, we were chanting. Senator Bayer brought back breakfast for the people who are occupying the space with us, and we served dinner. But during the whole occupation, we were chanting. The energy was constantly up, and we just wanted to make sure that Grace understood that we were standing in solidarity with her, because if Grace couldn't go home, neither could we.
I'm curious some of the changes you'd like to see in the state of Michigan or nationwide.
Definitely. So as we go into, we're bringing it back to what Eva and I will continue to fight for as we go into the school year. Detroit Public Schools, we're considering face-to-face learning. Well, there's been a plan to do face-to-face learning. And what does face-to-face learning look like in a pandemic and there's still a police presence in our schools? So if we're talking about the policing and criminalization of Black girls in a space where we're supposed to be educated and it's supposed to be a safe space, why is there a presence of police? So there's definitely a policy that we would like enacted about defunding the police and abolishing the police in our schools, especially heavily Black and brown, predominantly Black and brown districts, to eliminate that school to prison pipeline.
It's also very important to note that Grace's mother specifically reached out to the city for assistance in counseling between her and Grace. And the first thing that she was met with was police. they did not provide her the proper resources that she needed as a mom to take care of a child who has ADHD. And instead, they said, okay, obviously you and your daughter are having problems. Let's just take her to jail and let's just solve the problem right there. So I think that was also one of the biggest mistakes that they possibly could have made, was introducing the police to this family